Y'all got that wind or anything going on? Is there power
No,
issues?
they're doing something because last night it was completely out, which was actually pretty funny when I was trying to watch Star Trek. I had half an episode to go and I was like watching it on my phone eventually using my 3G or 5G connection because I couldn't get it to play.
Yeah, that's not the ideal way to watch. Although, I mean, I don't know, the resolution is
yeah,
probably...
we'll discuss that, I guess.
Yeah, maybe you didn't miss much.
Subspace transmission 33. That's the number I was looking up while we were... It's been a while. The last one was in 2021.
Wow, has it been that long, really? Wow.
I don't feel like that's right.
Yeah, I also don't feel like that's right.
That doesn't feel right. Let's see. Can I search across my channel? Subspace. 38 is the last one in 2023.
Okay, that feels
so.
More
I need
correct.
to update this list. I don't know why our videos were not. Oh, because there's more? There was a second page. I'm a dum-dum. But we only did 3 in the last 2 years. That's rough, dude.
That sounds more correct, sadly.
Yeah. 2 of them were on Prodigy. Which is now on Netflix?
Yeah, I think they bought them or something. I don't know what happened to that show.
What a weird thing. What a weird thing. You have your entire Paramount... Hello and welcome to We Were Gamers podcast. Subspace episode 39. 3 times 3 is 9. Almost 40.
Yeah.
We could have hit 40 when you hit 40, and that would have been more meaningful.
Would it? I guess, I mean, we didn't miss it by that much. I didn't turn 40 all that long ago. So in the grand scheme of things, we're pretty close, honestly. By our standards, that should count.
By the age of this podcast, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, JJ.
And to celebrate my birthday, we decided to watch horrible episodes of DS9. Why did we do this again, Andy? What was the impetus for this idea? This was a bad idea.
Well, we hadn't done this in so long, and I have not caught up on Lower Decks yet. And there's a lot.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, because I didn't want to rush you into watching like 9 episodes of Lower Decks in a week, which is fair.
And frankly, I think new Star Trek is in a huge state of flux. I think they're reevaluating everything about it.
Well, I think that you're right. You're definitely right. Like, I think they expected that Discovery was going to be doing way better than it did. I think
hold on. I don't want to get negative because they built the Paramount Plus service around Star Trek, basically. It was doing well enough. And then that service came online and all the expenses for that service came online. And they've got so much content up there now that it's like, now they're reevaluating Star Trek, which is a weird circular thing of like, well, what's propping the business up and then what doesn't make as much profit as other things in a short term. I think there's a real behind the scenes arguing happening going on there.
I think also it's a lot of like, they wanted to like do new stuff in Star Trek, and then the new stuff didn't do as well as when they did the old stuff again.
That's right. Possible.
And then the business people are like, look, nostalgia, money. And the people are like, but new ideas. And, the classic argument there. So, they're still doing that Section 31 thing, which
now it's a movie, though?
Yeah. I'm kind of shocked that they're doing at all, to be honest with you. I figured they had just like decided to can that idea. But I don't know, Also, I mean, Discovery got what, like 5 seasons or something? That's pretty long for a show these days. So maybe they just sort of ran its course and they were just like, all right.
I don't know. Yeah, probably right. I'm trying to think of like streaming TV shows. So The Mandalorian ended after 3 or 4 seasons.
3? Unless there's a 4th one coming that I don't know about.
I don't think so. I think they're talking about a movie for that thing.
Okay, so then 3.
But there was talks of a season 4. And then they were like, nah, we did that kind of good ending. We'll do a movie. Ahsoka is going to end next season probably. That'll be just
So
what, 2
that
seasons.
2, yeah.
The only thing that I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like contemporary, really popular streaming.
I guess like Game of Thrones, but that was put on like
It's not streaming though.
yeah, it's not really
That's
streaming,
HBO, right?
Yeah.
Like I watched it through HBO streaming, but I would say their numbers came from mostly old school TV.
I mean, at that time, 8 years ago, well, more than 8 years ago, but like, the original start of Game of Thrones, they were still getting significant numbers from TV. I don't know that they are anymore, but I think that definitely was the case then.
Yeah, I'm bummed that Lower Decks season 5 is going to be the final. I mean,
yeah,
they really
it is.
have so much that they can play with to make that show go on longer.
I think the unfortunate, watch the episodes and you'll
Yeah, there's only 2 left, I think.
Yes. I think
crazy?
Unfortunately the thing that got them, this is a good transition here. I'm lining it up. I think unfortunately the thing that gets Lower Decks here is that they started putting serial elements into the show, and that wrote them into a corner. Right at the end of last season, they all got promoted. Remember?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the show is called Lower Decks. Instead of leaving them all ensigns or whatever, they moved the plot forward, which is good. I mean, you have to do new things in the show so that they can do new things. And I don't doubt they could have continued on, doing new things at this, whatever the level is above ensigns or whatever. But anyway, I don't know. We'll see. I've watched almost all the ones that are out, but
yeah, there's two left. And I think
behind or something.
What's weird to me is like we watched DS9, right? And the episode numbers for these on season 1 of an unproven show were 10 and 16.
Yep.
And they were like way more than that. So an unproven show gets an hour on old school TV, and these are like 20 episodes,
45-minute episodes, and they did 20 something for the first season, and then most of the seasons were 26.
Yeah, so Lower Decks, hugely popular. 5 seasons of 10 episodes.
But I mean, 10 episode season orders is just the way things work these days, which again, this goes back to the we're not in the TV business, but I think you understand it. Like, they just don't make shows the way they used to make shows. Like, shows used to be like long running. They would have long seasons. You would get 20 something plus episodes. That doesn't happen anymore. All shows are 10 episodes max. Like, a lot are shorter.
Well, you don't have people's attention long enough to put in filler episodes. There's your transition, JJ.
Well, I was going with serial,
elements. Serial elements and filler episodes are kind of two sides of the same coin.
Which is the thing that DS9 introduced from Star Trek Generation, or TNG's like episode of the week thing. DS9 started introducing serial elements, and
later TNG has serialized stuff. I mean, Wesley Crusher's storyline evolves, and
it's like over the course of a season, like one thing happens, right? Whereas later episodes of DS9, like the Dominion War and stuff like that, changes from episode to episode. Like, you sort of need to watch.
Everything matters.
Yeah. But early on here, that is not the case.
So everyone does a best of, right? A best of this. These are the top 5. If you're binging it, you should watch these 30 episodes. This is the best 3 episodes of all Star Trek, blah, 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 blah. And it's not unusual for Star Trek. I believe Star Trek has a running worst episodes list that they update every convention.
Oh, yeah?
That is done by popular vote.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the 10 worst of all time. The only one on DS9 that has ever been on that list is Move Along Home.
And you can see why. I guess
it's it's not like I would put it up there as the worst TV I've ever seen.
No, certainly not. I think the important thing to recognize with regards to both of these episodes, we're going to talk about 2 pretty bad DS9 episodes, to be clear. Both.
So our theory was we should just watch what they call the worst of our favorite. Collectively, both our favorite show is DS9. There's no discussion about that, I think.
Yep.
And I could watch random episodes of it just like I could TNG. And just on the whole, my memory tells me that this show is just so good. Now we thought, you know what? Let's reevaluate it based on its worst. So we went to Move Along Home as number 1 here.
And then
season 1, episode 10.
And then If Wishes Were Horses.
Season 1, episode 16.
Yes.
Both season 1, interestingly. Wishes Were Horses is also on some of their worst lists, but never has made Star Trek's top 10 worst.
Which I think is probably due to the fact that like the overall quality of DS9 episodes is pretty high compared with like some of the really bad early TNG or really bad original series episodes.
It's hard to keep an Avery Brooks down.
The man can act, right? And I think the problem with both of these episodes, and they're both bad in similar ways, is that both of them are just very silly.
Yeah. I wrote in my notes for the Move Along Home, is this a kids episode? Is this the one where I could like find other? Well, there's the Tribbles also.
The Tribbles episode has like a lot of cool things going on with it, though.
The Tribbles episode is amazing, and I wondered if this was another one entry level DS9 for kids, because DS9 is not really for kids.
No, it's not.
Whereas you could show them TNG, you know, no problem.
Yeah, picking up the politics of refugees and terrorism and stuff is not really the space that kids linger in.
Inner working boardroom meetings between clandestine agencies on DS9 is not really.
Yeah, and really I also watched this week just to remind myself. I had to watch some other episodes in season 1 just to like get the vibe that like what else is happening here.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, the stuff that's different about this is how starkly weird these episodes are and silly, right? I think silly is the right word. Silly. Compared with the rest of the tone of the show. And that's the thing that makes them stand out as bad. I mean, I think Move Along Home is worse, but it
categorically worse than the other one.
And
I think objectively, categorically, every word you can come up with other than literally.
But literally too.
Move Along Home. But Move Along Home is just there. Nothing happens.
It is both confusing for most of the episode, as well as nonsensical, and there are no consequences for anyone, and like the like main villains, quote unquote, I guess, just like walk away at the end. It's like bye.
But they're not even really villains.
No, I know, but like
like
kidnapping people and like forcing them into like games and stuff.
But the villain's also kind of like Quark is the villain, maybe.
Sure, and again, nothing is learned. No reckoning happens for anyone. Quark is sad because he thinks he might lose money or his friends, and he takes the safe path out or whatever. And then, just kidding, they're all fine, bro. Like, haha, it was only a prank. And then like, what?
Yeah.
And then they're like, and we're gone. Wave the cape, the tuxedo mask. I'm out. Like,
yeah. I guess since we'll just go work through Move Along Home's story really fast, which is its first contact with the Wadi, right? Mm-hmm. The Wadi are some sort of race from through the wormhole. They ignore Starfleet and go straight to Quark because they want to play games, right? It seems like their society is some sort of society about playing games. Quark tries to cheat them, so they kidnap the Starfleet officers via some sort of teleporter, put them into a board game. Which isn't clear
to be clear at the start. It's not clear that it's a board game, although and it's also not clear what's actually happening.
It's not clear by the end anything that's happening. But in essence, they're in some sort of board game where they're moved by Quark somehow, but also they're just sort of moving, and then they solve puzzles. But the puzzles are basically like stupid nonsense that aren't actually hard or puzzles, and then towards the end
it's like, here is a random situation, there are drinks and this room is filling up with poison.
Drink.
What do you
drink.
do?
Yeah.
Well, there's no choice. It's like drink that. There's nothing else you could do. Just die. Like
they tell
what
you
kind
the
of game
answer.
is
The
this?
guy walks up and is like, drink. And you're like, okay. Oh, you solved it. Okay. But, we get the very famous Alamarain.
Yeah, Alamarain.
Dance.
Count to 4.
Alamarain dance comes from this.
Oh, God.
Yeah. You can tell. I don't think there's any more story to talk about. Quark, they get released from the game at the end when they win, I guess, by losing.
Quote unquote. Yeah. They win by losing.
I don't really understand.
The rules of the game are completely unclear. Why you think it's interesting is unclear.
Yeah. It's
how the people are actually affecting the people inside the game is wholly unclear. Just a mess. The thing is like you look at this, right? Like the structure of this episode, the ideas, what happens here. If this episode had happened in like season 4 or 6 or something, right? If they found time in between the Dominion War to meet these people from the Gamma Quadrant or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could see where there's the bones of a good idea here, right? It's like you could make an interesting episode out of this. And later on, the characters are more developed, the actors are more comfortable, like it's a little more clear like who everyone is and their personalities. Like you could develop something fun out of this, maybe. But
I guess
this ain't it. Like for sure.
Here's the issue, right? Very smartly, less so with Domjot, but like they play Dabo in Quark's bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you know the rules of Dabo? Because I don't off the right, but you can tell what Dabo is because there's a roulette wheel.
Right.
It follows the very simple rule of giving people some sort of tangential visual item that they can say, I see something that I recognize, even though I don't understand what they're doing exactly. I understand that this is gambling. It's based off random chance. People are using, these types of things to bet.
They're spinning somehow, right? It's like it's betting. Yeah.
I understand enough of what Dabo is to not need to understand what Dabo is. And then they introduce this thing that is just like, is this the 3D chessboard? No. Is this a board game? Maybe, but the pieces don't seem to move in any fashion other than the guy walking around and putting them random places. Like,
yeah.
But
only children enter at the first chap, Andrew. Remember, only
children enter in the first chap, and you learn by playing. Like, well, then the audience needs to learn by playing.
This is a terrible game.
I mean, it's just so dumb. Well, Mitch might, if it had been written better, might have been the point. But there doesn't seem to be a lesson that the guy is teaching Quark. Right? It's not like Quark's plea at the end is like, good, thank you. Thank you for apologizing. It turns out the game isn't actually a game. We just sort of do this when people try to cheat us.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been a better... That is a better writing than what this script does, right? Like, okay, we have now punished you for your cheating against us, right? That would be 100%. Better than what this is, instead of just like, ha-ha! Like,
yeah.
Which is basically what happens, and then he like twirls his cape and walks out of the bar. That's the end.
He definitely should have had a cape to twirl when he walked
out of the bar. Did. He turns around and he's like, ha-ha! And then like leaves. And then they go away and you never hear from them again, thank God.
Yeah. Thank God, yeah. Then we get into the like beyond the nonsense of the episode. There's also the nonsense of, it seems like I don't know how many episodes these writers wrote, but it seems like they just don't remember anything about the Star Trek universe. Like Bashir can't replicate a uniform.
Yeah. There's multiple things that also like Major Kira, when they're in the game, is like panicking because she's never been in a stressful situation before.
the Bajoran resistance fighter is now
she's like,
panicking.
You gotta let me out. It's like, you've been in bad places. This is like pretty decent, all things considered.
Yeah.
The other thing that boggled my mind about this episode, bro, they had to make all these sets. Oh my God.
I actually wrote a note. I wrote a note.
It must have been crazy expensive to film this horrible episode.
The rooms are 2 to 3 sets max. So yeah, but the rock
filming
set
from different angles and stuff, I guess. Yeah.
I have to go back and watch the series finale, but I think this rock set got reused as the final fight between
Gul Dukat and Cisco at the end,
and Cisco. I think it's the same ledge that they fight on.
Interesting.
It looks.
So I wonder if they had like
very similar,
or maybe the backlot or something somewhere had a generic.
I mean, they store all this stuff once they build it. They don't just dismantle it willy nilly.
So right, as long as the show is ongoing, yeah, of course, keep it around because you might need a rock outcropping or something.
Exactly. So I think the rock outcropping at least was not a waste.
But I mean, like those Alamarine sets are hopefully in a dumpster, right?
burn them.
And they were useless immediately after this episode too, because you're never going to have another thing that looks like this. I guess maybe you could repaint.
You could repaint them and redesign them slightly. Not that big a deal. But I watched this and I was like, I guess it's not the worst TV I've ever seen, but it's just confusing. There's so much like Quark's bar even is like used, and then the character of the bar is just completely ignored. Like there's these aliens that took over, and Quark's like, okay, we're just gonna shut the whole place down, and I'm gonna wait until they do all sorts of stuff to start cheat. It just makes no sense. Like, just the whole thing makes no sense. And the backwards clapping just because, like, oh, they're aliens. They have to clap backwards.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell about halfway through that Avery Brooks was like, I'm going to still act, but this episode's ridiculous. Because you can see him cracking up in some of these like scenes where they're figuring out these dumb puzzles.
Yeah. The thing about the whatever it is, these trials or whatever they're putting them through, right? It's like these are really stupid. Like, it barely has the definition of a puzzle, right? Actually,
they're tricordering everything. They literally could have just walked.
Yeah, it's just like there was no way for them to go except the one way that they were allowed to go. You go into the room, you do the thing, and you leave. It's like they could have like. This actually would have made more sense if this was like a D&D game than whatever the hell this was.
Yeah. It reminded me a lot of like some of the worst original series episodes. I wonder if they were trying to write something similar to like TOS, and
maybe it had that vibe.
It has a TOS, deep TOS vibe with like static sets, wandering around, various simple solutions to things. Like I wonder if that was kind of like the impetus for the idea for this episode. Man, I could see why it's the bottom of the heap for sure. I didn't think it was going to be that bad, especially at the beginning. I was like, maybe this gets better, and then I'm like, it gets worse.
No, it doesn't get better, sadly.
Yeah. Wishes Were Horses was better than this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see why it's on people's worst lists, other than it reminds me that early Julian Bashir really sucks.
That's part of it. I think the other thing that is really bad about If Wishes Were Horses is I wrote the note. Sure, hold on. I'm looking at my own notes here.
Yeah. Do you mean
the gender politics of the 90s are pretty different than the current day, I guess. There's a lot of like it's a pretty cringe like storyline, right? The overall like story, again, this is also a silly episode again, right? Like there's a theme there, definitely.
Yeah.
But like the idea is like, oh man, Julian thinks Dax is hot, so we're gonna make a hot Dax for him to make out with. Yeah. And it's like, but it's all in his mind, because everything is all in his mind. And then real Dax shows up. Oh no, isn't that fun and embarrassing? Like, again, it's very cringeworthy, right? I think that's the
I mean, just in general, early Bashir is always cringeworthy, and this is a reminder that he kind of sucks until later.
Yeah. And, and it's funny because the other characters don't have that, right? Like, it is very strange that they did Rumpelstiltskin, which, by the way, I saw that. I was like, oh, it's the man from Another Place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, I immediately clocked it, right?
Yep.
I read on Memory Alpha that the original character was supposed to be a leprechaun instead of Rumpelstiltskin. And Cole Meany was like, hell no. You are not going to make me do
act alongside
Irish like stereotypes. I won't do it. And they're like, all right, we'll find something else. Yeah.
Good for you, Cole Meany.
Yeah. I was like, good.
That guy's a great actor too, by the way. He really made his chops in this show, I think.
DS9 is the like definition of O'Brien must suffer, right? Like he just has a lot of those episodes, and but
it's weird. It's a weird one. I think it is more TNG than TOS. It definitely has that feeling of like something weird's going on and we don't know what it is, and it's definitely a Star Trek's version of it. It was all a dream.
Totally. That's totally what happens here. Yeah. And then the like, you get the, it's all in their imagination stuff. But then later, the imaginations are conspiring with each other. Ooh, what a twist. Right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so, that was to be expected, right?
And then at the end, it's aliens, not, it's not actually like some weird unexplained phenomenon. It's aliens, actually.
Yeah, of course. Sure. I mean, again, it's the Star Trek version of It's All a Dream, I guess.
Yeah, no, it is, though. It's some weird alien thing and then never explained. Goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah, but, it's still got the good elements of DS9 in there. Like Avery Brooks gets his Captain Sisko moment at the end of, hey, baseball player guy, this is kind of like first contact. We should discuss things and learn to trust people. And yes, I understand that imagination makes humans unique, and that's very cool. And we should be. You haven't, like that.
Yeah.
That little moment where he gets to act and give us our lesson, and sure. Well,
and like this episode really does have a lot of the like very DS9 like the Avery Brooks loves baseball or the writers of DS9 love baseball stuff comes in.
Dude, I forgot the very important fact that came out of this episode, which is that baseball is not played anymore.
Yeah, baseball's gone.
Baseball's the guy professional baseball. We are living in the age of Shohei Ohtani and hundreds of millions of dollars for players to play baseball. And in the future now, we have to think that the writers of DS9 in the 1990s thought that baseball would be dead.
The player in the game or in the show, right, is from the London Kings, firstly. And he says the last World Series had 300 people in the bleachers.
Yeah.
Right.
And that Cisco thinks that he was likely the best player of all time, this guy.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, what a view of the world. Because what was this, just post players strike?
Maybe 93, I think, right? So yeah, maybe.
Baseball players strike was 94, 95.
So it was leading up to it. They were agitating about it for sure.
Was agitating. Baseball was about to people were about to get really down on baseball in the US, or already were. Because
I think people were already pretty down on baseball at this point. And baseball, to be fair, didn't start having the resurgence. I don't know, resurgence, but the sort of upward swing it's having these days until what, like
mid 2000s?
Yeah, mid or late even 2000s. So there was a good 15 years there where baseball looked like it was dying. So I could see how you get there, right?
You had the 80s strike, you had the 90s strike. The 90s strike really cratered people's views of baseball.
Yeah, because that one was for like hundreds of days, right? That was the big one that I remember. Anyway.
Almost a year. I mean, I think they basically skipped a season, didn't they?
Yeah, it was big. I remember.
I think they skipped a whole season. They didn't have a World Series that year. And then what was it like? When was the steroids era? Was after that, which really cratered again people's view of baseball.
Yeah, and the McGuire Sosa home run stuff, like people thought it was cool, and then all the steroid stuff came out, and then really was bad.
This is slightly before all that, but the sentiment was already beginning, as far as I can remember.
Yeah, it was. I definitely remember it. Like, my dad used to watch baseball all the time as a kid growing up, and like right around this era, he sort of stopped. So,
so that's kind of the world that believed that baseball would be dead by the 24th century or whatever we're in DS9's era.
Yeah, totally crazy. Believable, right? Like, stuff comes and goes. Obviously, Star Trek is so different to us from now, but very interesting.
I actually wrote that down to talk about it a little bit. Star Trek thinking sports might be different in the future because they don't have money anymore. So, the idea of being a professional athlete, right? It doesn't really benefit the empire, so to speak, for you to be a professional athlete.
Well, I definitely think
Star Trek's world,
that in Star Trek's world, especially at this time when Gene Roddenberry was still around, there was definitely, maybe he was gone by the time they were doing DS9.
They started it with him, I think.
Yeah, but he definitely had thoughts about, like, the lack of money and like, well, they wouldn't have sports because that's competition, and there's no competition in the Federation and stuff like that, right? So you could definitely see how, those kinds of thoughts would get there, right?
Yeah,
but all that kind of gets tossed as things go.
Roddenberry, it was in development, I think, before he died, and then I think they kind of kept it going afterwards. I don't think he was a big fan of the idea of the space station, though, as far as I recall.
Yeah, I think he really wasn't, because then they can't like do new stuff, right? The whole like
which is why you end up with the Defiant.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's more interesting to me is the idea that in the writers' room, they're like, baseball is a big part of this show. It's not like these writers of this episode made up the fact that baseball was dead in this future.
No, yeah, like that had to already, be a thing
that's a canon that they were okay writing into this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, to me, the most interesting part of Wishes Were Horses, alongside it just kind of being outdated visions of Star Trek that were it's a little bit forgettable and boring, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah. Notably, neither of these episodes feature Garrick, which is clearly why they're not as good as they could be, because Garrick is great every time he's in the show.
Yeah, sure.
I did one of the other episodes that I watched. Was it like episode 2? I think it might have been episode 2 of season 1. Sure. Garrick is kind of like, doing his spy stuff with Julian, and that's like way better than anything that happens in either of these 2 episodes.
I like when he's like, I love when he keeps getting that's the best of Julian, right? Is later on when he gets dragged into these things that he's not meant to be a part of.
Yeah. Garrick has Julian hide in the changing room while he does an illicit deal with Klingons or whatever, and that kind of stuff is the stuff that you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, I think If Wishes Were Horses definitely has problems as a episode, but again, it's not on the level of Move Along Home, where it's just confusing and doesn't make any sense for half.
I don't know how Move Along Home made it through editing or whatever the problem was. I have no idea. That one was a travesty.
And then, like, I think the really annoying part, well, I don't know, annoying. There's a lot of annoying parts, but in Move Along Home at the end, like, all the characters don't comment about the situation. There's no, like, moral wrap up from Commander Sisko. Like, even you at least get that with the alien at the end in Wishes Were Horses, right? But he doesn't confront the Wadi for like teleporting them without their consent. He doesn't do any of that stuff, right? It's just like they just leave and everyone's like, "Huh, wow, crazy." And
I think it's important to remember too that like DS9 and TNG are kind of airing at the same time here, and early DS9 doesn't really have the writing chops that later DS9 does when they bring in new writers, and they also bring in, I think, doesn't Ron Moore come in later, and they also bring in TNG writers, and that really shakes up the show quite a bit. They get a good start, like they give it a good.
The first several
episodes, but they're not.
Yeah, I mean, just like
killing it.
Just like TNG, right? There's like some really good episodes in first TNG, and then a lot of really not good ones, right? The first season, and it's the same here, right?
Yeah.
These are two really bad ones, and Move Along Home may be the worst one they ever produced. But there's good stuff in the first season. Like the first episode is really good. Like the two-parter, The Emissary.
Oh yeah,
is really good. That's a great episode. Episode's little mini arc thing.
Yeah.
Sets everything up. Sort of tells you who everybody is. You don't get Garrick in that again, which is a big letdown. But again, they're spending a bunch of time with the Bajoran stuff, and you got to do that.
There's not enough time for Garrick to be part of it. You need to.
They have to spend that special effects budget.
Well, you also gotta get inundated in the universe in order to care about a Cardassian working on the station.
Yeah, totally. And they didn't even get time to, at the end, like get the station working. They have to move the station in that episode, right? That was the first thing.
Yeah.
So, I think it's there is good stuff there. And, you and I both agree that this is the best one of these shows.
I think so. It's going to be hard to top for me.
So, not that other stuff couldn't maybe get there eventually, but as it exists right now, this is the best one.
It really is wholly a bummer that the best one, TNG gets a lot of credit for being more widely known, but the best one will probably never get
the HD treatment.
The HD treatment due to the graphics and stuff,
Yeah, it really is too bad because this is the era, TNG they were able to do it with TNG because there wasn't as much CG stuff. Like there was a little bit,
There was, yeah, but not very much.
But unfortunately, this show has quite a bit of it as it goes on, and redoing that stuff would be, I
mean, prohibitive. It's not even re-rendering, right? Because they don't have original render files for any of this stuff. They just have whatever they got printed to tape.
And even if they did, I bet it wouldn't look good, right? And so then they would have to redo it, and it wouldn't. Yeah, so
I wonder in the future
it is unfortunate.
With some sort of, like Adobe maybe can come up with some sort of generative system that could copy this stuff and upscale it to a acceptable degree. But I don't know.
There are systems that people use to like upscale stuff like anime and shows like that. I don't know how well those systems work on stuff like this. Yep. But even when you do that, like you upscale, like the place I'm most familiar with it is like upscaling pre-rendered games. So like Final Fantasy VII, the original one, right?
Okay.
That game was built for a PS1. It has pre-rendered backgrounds that look okay on a CRT and not very good on a modern TV, right?
Right. This is why I was trying to watch a DS9 on my TV, and I was like, okay, this looks atrocious on this 75-inch 4K TV. And then when the internet started garbing out on me, I moved to my phone, and I was like, well, this is actually somewhat more tolerable given that it's so much smaller.
Yeah, I watched it on my computer monitors because I think it was going to be painful on the TV.
It's atrocious, dude. I mean, it's gonna hurt this show in the long run. People getting into it because they're gonna come from TNG and be like, "What is this?"
Yep. And so, like, where I was going with this is like those pre-rendered backgrounds. People, because they love these games, have gone in and used like these AI upscaling algorithms on these pre-rendered backgrounds to get them looking nicer in HD resolutions because the original pre-rendered assets exist somewhere, but they're not, the companies aren't going to come back and remake these games, but because they know kind of like, that they can train the algorithms on these sort of pre-rendered images. There's a lot of them because it's a whole game. You can do this sort of work to make it, ease this out and make it look a little better. The problem is I don't know how well that would apply to the kind of rendered stuff that exists in DS9. Like maybe, especially for the the opening panning shots around the space station and stuff.
Somebody's probably already made that as a fan,
So there was a thing that happened a while back. We talked about this, right? The original producers of DS9 came back and like did a whole thing.
They did, yeah.
And I think did they just do the emissary? I don't know what they did. They did a like shot of what a HD DS9 would look like.
Yeah, that was during that that documentary that you and I watched.
The documentary, right? So I think, they had an idea of how it could be done, right? And, unfortunately, like where the documentary lands and where the state of things, I assume, still is that like, oh, you would need a lot of money to do this. And no TV company is going to do it.
It actually, ties into our beginning of all this, right? Like, what can you afford to do? Now it's 10 episode seasons for streaming. And that's probably costs as much or more than these 20 episode seasons did. And it's just it's not going to happen in our lifetime. Or if it does, and they need me to pay for a Blu-ray set, let me know.
Yeah, look, hey, I'm here. I will buy the Blu-ray set of DS9 if you need it, right? But I imagine, the other thing is like physical sales have fallen off a cliff too.
Right. It's all streaming now, but all the streaming isn't making enough money. So what do you do?
When they first started doing those like next gen HD updates or whatever, that was like in the heyday of like Blu-ray media being like popular and out there. Yep. That stuff has fallen off a cliff even.
Unless you really, 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 really love something. Like I probably have 15 movies that I adore, and so I have rebought all those in 4K Blu-ray because I want to see them as high a quality as I can when I put them on my TV. That's it. That's all the physical media that exists here, other than game media, because often I don't replay games. But those 15 movies that I care about.
I only have I think I only have the first couple seasons of Next Generation HD Blu-rays because I kept waiting for them to finish it and then put out like the set,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And then by the end of it, I was like, I don't actually want to own all these on Blu-ray, so never mind.
Yeah. Yeah. They waited too long.
Well, I mean, they did like one a year or whatever because that's how long it takes to do this work, which reasonable. But, by the end, the tastes had changed, right? I just didn't want the physical media at that point. So it was like, well, what are you going to do?
Staring down the death of physical media as people that grew up with it and feeling somewhat responsible for it, like we don't want all the clutter. And yet now they're able to re-edit stuff. Like I was watching I was watching a movie the other day and I was like, where's this scene? And then I had to look up online. It was like, yeah, this scene's been removed from this movie. It's not in the movie anymore. And like, there's no version of it unless you own the original DVD that has this scene. They just took it out.
Who took it out?
The producer, the owner, like the studio that owns that movie decided, we don't like this scene in here anymore. It's too controversial. So, every Blu-ray, every 4K Blu-ray, every whatever, every streaming copy doesn't have this, 4 or 5 second scene anymore. It's like, okay. It really changes the movie.
Interesting. And, those kinds of things happen with shows all the time, especially in the advent of streaming and like widescreen stuff, right? The Simpsons uploads on whatever are they on Disney? I guess they're on Disney, right?
Hulu and Disney, yeah.
Which are both the same thing, right?
But I think they that's the only thing that I can think of that they post to both, right? Okay. Sometimes it's on one or not or the other.
that show was shown in 4x3 at the beginning.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of specific gags related to the fact that the show, like, is shot in the way that it is, and there's like sight gags and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the show is stretched in some of those versions that are streaming.
Yes, they have fixed this.
Like did they? Do they have the 4x3 versions available now?
Fixed. You are allowed to play it in either version now. There's a selector when you watch it on Disney Plus. You can watch it original or stretched.
Does the original version actually have the original version, or do they just crop it?
No, I think it's the original 4x3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was a huge complaint when it happened. And,
because they just here's all the episodes of The Simpsons that you love. And then it's like, wait, this joke doesn't work because they stretched it to fit the screen and it cut off the part that was the joke.
They used some sort of computer program to do it. They didn't do it by hand when they originally did that. And they just would like put in all the old episodes, make them look better. And like, then the creators came back and like, you've ruined the show, and all the fans are complaining because rightfully, like, it's bad.
Yeah.
And they had to put in money to, and their solution wasn't like, oh, we'll fix it. It's like, okay, well, we'll leave the bad thing up, and also, here's the original stuff, which is fine. I mean, it's like, I wish they would do with Star Wars, right? Like,
why didn't
give me the 77? Give me the 77. Don't give me anything. Just put 77 on there.
Yeah, I mean that is the criminal issue with Star Wars, right? It's like, why won't they just release the original one?
But that's even with physical media when it still existed. Like, you had to go back to the VHS tape in order to prove that Han shot first.
I mean, those VHS tapes are the actual definitive editions of those movies now, right? After what happened with the special editions, those like that VHS version is the one that people want, right?
It's brutal to be in this world of, we understand what it meant to print something to media and let it be solidly, perfectly done. And now also be the charging force behind, I don't want physical things. Give me them on streaming or on digital storefronts. But then they're like, yeah, but then you don't own it. It's really a bad line we have to try and walk.
Yeah. And again, I don't know how we approach that, going forward, because I still don't want like hundreds of discs or whatever.
I don't. Yeah. I can't. Yeah. I can't do it. My house is too full to begin with. And it's a bad habit to teach kids, to be honest.
Yeah. I share less of my house with children than you do, and there's still no space. So it's like, I don't know what the right answer is, but certainly the answer we've come up with, it doesn't seem to be it. Just
applying some amount of archivism to these things would be good, but the people in charge, the CEOs, don't have that in their line of sight.
Yeah, and unfortunately, and I mean, as is the case and has been the case throughout the digital era, it will be people that do piracy that fix these problems for people that care about it, right? Which is sad, because like, I'm sure there are people who would pay a lot of money for the good cut of the 77 version of Star Wars, right?
Sure. Yeah, like, here it is on...
We're going to put it out on Blu-ray only. We're going to make the original theatrical cut. There's no, it's touched up for HD or whatever, but like, we didn't do any of the special effects stuff. We didn't do any of that other stuff. This is the original one. Here you go. Like,
immediately pirated.
People would, yeah, of course. But like, there'd be they would make money on doing that. There's enough people who care deeply about Star Wars that would buy that, I think.
Yeah, especially considering the history of it, you'd go out and buy it also. You'd be like, oh, they're not going to keep this out forever. I got to go get it.
Well, and then that's, the whole next topic is the artificial scarcity stuff, right? Which is like, again, that is the thing Disney is doing intentionally to, make more money off of you and I.
Yeah.
I don't know. It sucks. I don't know what to say about it other than it sucks.
All right. Well, since it sucks is the end of the podcast.
And these episodes did suck, but again, and I think even Move Along Home, which again we really didn't like, it's totally watchable. It's just confusing and kind of boring.
Okay.
But it's not like unwatchable like some TV is sometimes,
Yeah, it's fine. If I were watching that at the time, I'd been like, this was weird. Okay, next week,
Yeah, I definitely think like if this episode had come later in the series when the writers were more confident and the characters had been, filled out a little better, it might have made a better episode. But again, it is what it is. They were filling the time. They got it in.
Yeah. Yep. And fun story. Squarespace seems to be down. So we're going to end the episode on that note.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. I think we should do this again, though. I think we need to do more of these per year than just 2 per year. I don't know how we do it.
Yeah, the big problem is like my access to time. Yeah, but
it's gotten shorter.
I'm with you.